The lovely lunch at such a fantastic location. So, my name is Jason Leonidas. I run Actian in Asia Pacific. I'm headed out of Melbourne, lovely Melbourne, who is also putting on a nice day today. So, my remit is Asia Pacific. So I have a team of people that covers the region. We've got guys in India, China, Japan, Korea, South Asia and Australia. We even go as far out as Fiji, where we have a number of customers out there. At Actian, we are specialists in data management. We have a long pedigree in data management, which dates back to the 70s. I was just explaining earlier that we have a number of operational databases that support mission critical applications in lots of different industries, whether it be General Motors manufacturing plants in Brazil to financial institutions on Wall Street like Goldman Sachs, or L'Oreal in France, or here locally Department of Defence or the Australian Electoral Commission runs the foundation of our constitution on our database technology. So we support all these customers all over the world, 24/7, supporting these mission critical applications. As Mike will explain to you, recently our focus has been around big data, and we've got some very exciting initiatives and announcements that we're going to share with you today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mike. Mike is our CTO. He's been around the industry quite a long time. He's quite a thought leader. He understands the business concepts and the technology extremely well and is able to marry those together to very practical terms and very entertaining as well. So are we going to hand over to Mike now? Yeah, okay, so without further ado, I'll welcome Mike up to the floor, and he can take you through a little bit about the trends around big data and what he sees as the emerging trends and challenges. Thank you to Mike. I should also add that Mike has a long history in Australia, and I'm sure he'll elaborate a little bit on it.
This is my prop. They say the most dangerous space in a room is to be between Mike and a whiteboard. So I'll keep that space very small here, just in case we need a prop. So welcome everybody, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Jason's right, I do have a history in Australia. I sat for the HSC here in 1972, December, at a school up in Armidale. Did anybody know Armidale, New England, Tablelands up there? So I lived there for 2 years, did my year 11, year 12 there, and enjoyed myself immensely. I've stayed in touch with all my friends in Australia. They've now ended up in either Sydney or Nambucca Heads or Armidale, so that's my triangle every time I come. And I got here Saturday and spent a couple of days in the Hunter with a friend of mine who owns a winery there. It's very good to have friends who own wineries. We had a big party there Saturday night that sprawled into Sunday morning. It was lovely. And then up the coast to Nambucca and over to Armidale for a couple of days, where they are sitting the HSC right now in the same assembly hall where I sat 40 years ago. So not a lot of innovation or advancement there necessarily. So I enjoy myself immensely. It's a wonderful place. I always do both, mix business and pleasure here. So on to the business. I am the CTO at Actian. The CTO role at Actian is an outside role, so I don't really participate much in the internal engineering culture, though some CTOs do. So I'm the corporate evangelist, technology evangelist. I'm on the road all the time. I talk to customers, I talk to thought leaders, I talk to journalists. And the net effect is that I get to sort of weave together and cohere interesting trends that I see in the space. And I have the luxury, I get to run something called the Innovation Lab inside Actian. So I really get the luxury to ponder not only where we are, but where are we going? What are the next decades, not just next few months, what are the next decades going to look like? At Actian, that's a pretty exciting job. As Jason said, we're a company with very deep roots, thousands of customers in every major geography in the world, one of the biggest private software companies in the world. But several years ago, we decided to worry about the next 30 years, not just the last 30 years, and we spent almost $300 million to assemble what I think is the most advanced next generation, hyper-parallelized, super scaling, fully distributed a parallel infrastructure for big data and analytics. So that's just a background to give you some bona fides in terms of Actian's investment and my experience in this marketplace. So what is going on out there? What are the big changes? And Australia, in some sense, is a little bit of a smaller market than some. Adoptions maybe a little bit later here. So in a way, I'm like a man from the future. I can tell you a little bit about what's coming at you. So the space we're in, and the space that I concentrate on overwhelmingly, is big data and analytics. How to think about that space? I often present on something I call the age of data, where I talk about data being the central asset around which our entire lives pivot. We had an era where hardware dominated everything for about 30 years. We had an era, I'm using past tense, where software dominated everything for about 30 years. But about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, we started seeing companies like Google and their cohorts emerge that are really data companies. They're not really, yes, they use software, but they also use furniture. That doesn't make them a furniture company. And nor are they software companies. All they do is crunch data. They assemble data, they crunch it, they rent data, they sell data. If you think about your banks, if you think about anybody, you read a newspaper story, somebody hacked your bank. You know, they don't run in there and steal the SAP software, even though they probably overpaid $10 million for the SAP software, and run from the room with it, ha ha, I got their CRM software. No, they hack your data. Because that's the asset. People are now talking about data being valued on balance sheets as part of the asset base of the company. I read a story recently where an airline's loyalty program was of higher value than the entire multi-billion-dollar airline and its asset base. And so yeah, it's all about data now. So isn't that just what we've always been doing? Haven't we been crunching data for a while? Isn't business intelligence pulling data from operational systems and feeding it into my infrastructure so I can ask questions? Sort of, but I'm very happy that the big data space is no longer just about bigness. In the United States, all the events now are big data and analytics. And frankly, the spotlight is shifting from the sheer bigness of the data to what you can do with it. Can you drive advanced analytics? Can you extract meaning? Can you find the deep hidden patterns? Can you build predictive models that augment our ability to make decisions every day in our business lives, even in our personal lives? Should I turn left? Should I turn right? Should I hire this person? Should I take this job? Should I price it at $7 or $8? Should I, is this fraud? Should I give this person a loan? Should I not give this person a loan? Is this part going to fail on the aircraft? Is it not going to fail on the aircraft? All of these are probabilistic questions. The average human makes thousands of these kinds of decisions a day. And so what we're really talking about now is a shift that, in my opinion, is the biggest shift that I have ever seen in software. I think it's going to go beyond software. I think it's going to go into our everyday lives. We think now, we who play in big data analytics, that if we could capture these new streams of data, and if we could prepare them, cleanse them, and analyze them, we would be able to gather insights that would allow us to make decisions in a fundamentally better way than we've ever made them before. So that's why people are excited here. Big data and analytics means vastly improving our decision making, regardless if it's in business or in our personal lives. So let's take the next level of drill down. What do we mean by pulling the data in from our sources? We all know about transactional data. That's traditional data. We're pulling data out of our ERP systems and our CRM systems. Walmart's a big business. It took them 50 years to get to a terabyte in their data warehouse. So a terabyte's a lot of data, but those are just business transactions. Think of a click you make when you buy something. That's a credit card transaction, a classic business transaction. Maybe you're ordering from Amazon. But behind that click, that single order that's the credit card transaction that we know of as an event that we care about, are hundreds and hundreds of other clicks that we made that manifest themselves in the click streams, in the web logs. There's comments that might have made on social media. And so below that waterline of business transactions is a 10x, 100x, 1000x increase in data that supports that single business transaction, that involves all the human interactions that we've made to get there. And that's kind of where we are right now in the evolution of data and data life cycles. But we're about to hit the really big idea. And that's the Internet of Things, that's machine-generated data. We're instrumenting the universe. We're turning every dumb object in the world, every dumb object is becoming a smart object. We're starting with the obvious ones. I was with somebody this morning, they said the new Joint Strike Fighter, the aircraft that Australia uses, that others use, every time it lands, there's another terabyte of data that's collected from the machines that are on board. A modern BMW has 11 gigabytes of Java code in it. It has 3,600 sensors. I guarantee you in 10 years it'll have 36,000 sensors. And they'll be measuring something not every 10th of a second, but every 100th of a second. And so it doesn't matter what you have, your refrigerator, your car, your shoe, your eyeglasses, everything is going to be instrumented. And everything is going to be emitting a constant, and I mean constant, permanent stream of timestamped digital data events. So that's, when people talk about big data and analytics, it hasn't really hit us yet. That is what's coming. So classic transactional data, new web data, human interaction, social media, but then the giant wave, the river of data that will hit us is coming from machine-generated data from the Internet of Things. So the world's a little bit worried because, frankly, and this is maybe a bold statement, but I'll make it anyway, this simple fact is ineluctable. This is coming. This wave of data, this river of data will overwhelm and make obsolete pretty much the entire software industry. And so famous products that we know and love, or maybe not love so much, but write very big checks for, are worried right now about this next age. Who's going to build that infrastructure to be able to capture data at that kind of scale, to be able to land it and cleanse it and prep it and geotag it and pre-compute it and aggregate it and then analyze it with advanced analytic techniques? And the answer is almost nobody. And so what's going on right now, and we're in I call this period an interregnum, the period between the kings. The old period works, but it's dying, and something new has to emerge to be able to cope and find the value and the meaning and the insights that are inside this river of data. And that's what people mean by big data analytics. So this is every bit as big a deal as you read about. So let's go one level deeper into that and try to understand some of the challenges and opportunities that are in this ecosystem that I'm talking about. So if data is being born digitally, which it is, and it's flowing constantly, and it is, then somehow I have to capture this river of data in a way that I haven't before. And the first thing I have to worry about is just physically, where do I put it? Where do I land it? This is the word people use now in sentences. Where do you land your data? It's very similar to other metaphors. I sometimes say data is the new oil. And of course, data is valuable, like oil is valuable, but the metaphor is really this. In the same way that we pull crude data in from all over the world and we land it someplace and we refine it into high-value petroleum products, in the exact same way, businesses are going to land crude data from these many, many sources, and they're going to prep it and refine it and turn it into high-value information and analytic products and outcomes to drive decisions in your lives and in your business. But how do you do that when it's an almost incredible scale? Well, I'll make another bold prediction. About 15 years in the future, this will all be residential property, and every single business that crunches data will be crunching data on a platform called Hadoop. I don't make Hadoop, I don't sell Hadoop, I don't care about it other than the fact that it's going to become the dominant platform on which we all process these rivers of data. But I'll ask, how many of you have heard of Hadoop? I'm sure everybody has. You guys know customers? Do you see Hadoop in its infancy in Australia? Is it a pilot project, POC kind of tire-kicking thing? Is it maybe here we have the luxury of experimenting a little bit, so people are early adopters? I'm curious a little bit of feedback on Hadoop. So the simple question is it in production? Do you guys know of customers where Hadoop is in production?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe there are quite a few, yes.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah, absolutely. I know of some.
In large enterprise, if they're multinationals, definitely, because their European or US branches are already doing it. So yes, it's in production here. CSRO probably have 20 petabytes on it, I guess. There are lots of places using Hadoop for different reasons. Some are using purely as storage.
Yep.
Some are dabbling in
the data lake.
Yep.
Good.
They don't know what they're going to do with the data yet. They just know they need it. So it is here, but it's very early. And I think a lot of organisations are still struggling with all the things you talked about. And that is that the old guard is still trying to get every last drop of blood out of the investment in the old tin. And the new guard are trying to figure out how to get rid of it.
No, you're exactly right. I think it's probably earlier here than it is I often say these big ideas in technology, they sort of erupt in California like a volcano, and then they seismically spread around the world in various time circles. And it's probably later in its adoption cycle here, but I've been working with Hadoop for almost 8 years. We've been Cloudera partners for 7 years, Hortonworks partners since the day they launched. We know a lot at Actian. We're huge investors in that ecosystem, and it's coming like a freight train. And one of the simple answers is, where do you store all the damn data? You can't land it in Teradata. There's just too much friction. You couldn't write the check. You need big wallet to be able to handle big data. And yeah, you're right. People have to go for something new. I used to think other things would emerge. I really watched a lot of interesting early technologies, but Microsoft uses Hadoop, IBM uses Hadoop, Oracle has announced support for Hadoop. So yeah, Hadoop is what it is all the time. So don't care if you know a lot about it or not. But my point is, there are new technologies and new vendors in this game. So if that data is landing someplace and it lands in Hadoop, Hadoop is like a lot of young things. It holds incredible promise, but it's really stupid and immature and Stone Age in so many ways. But clearly it's the landing zone for where data goes. And Hadoop has got a couple, I'll throw in my 2 cents worth, it's got a couple of ideas that I think are permanently important. And one of them is co-locating compute and data. So Hadoop architecturally, in a way that's different than traditional enterprise class big data architecturally forces you to adopt commodity servers, it's not a bad thing, and have massively parallel and distributed software to execute on that cluster of commodity servers. And so the cluster is the computer. This is a radical idea for many people. They still think the computer is the computer, that I care about the laptop or the server or the client server. No, that's over. The cluster is all that matters. Why that's interesting is because if we could ever run on that cluster, we'd be able to just add 10 machines. It holds enormous promise, and Hadoop guarantees and actually meets that promise. But the traditional software industry is unprepared for that. If I listed the top 100 products in the world and said how many of them today run natively Yarn certified in a fully distributed, parallel, resilient manner on a Hadoop cluster, it would be 0. That's not a good thing. If I'm right, and Hadoop is the computing platform of the future, then we're in a state of high disruption inside the software industry right now. So data lands in Hadoop, that's my prediction. It lands someplace economical. That's HDFS, the distributed file system of Hadoop. I'll give you another phrase that I like. Data has gravity. What we've learned is that it's fairly expensive to move data, but that's the traditional architectures often. We have our big SANs, our big NASAs, the data doesn't move fast enough, we overspend for fiber channel and InfiniBand and all these. No. Hadoop's blown that up. It said commodity hardware, commodity disks, commodity network, Ethernet improves, it's now 10 gig is the standard. If you co-locate compute and data, a modern 16-core commodity server is a supercomputer. Every core is a 64-bit supercomputer itself. And if you ever could get software that could actually exploit that in a fully parallelized, distributed way, you'd enjoy price performance that we've never seen before. And that's what scares the traditional players in the industry. So Hadoop has goodness to go with its immaturity, and that's why data's rushing there. If data rushes there, and you heard it said earlier, it's the data lake, it's the first place we land things, people have I think, mistakenly consigned Hadoop or these big data infrastructures to low-value pre-processing. I call it the ETL ghetto. They've kind of pushed Hadoop into the ETL ghetto. I say they, the traditional vendors, and they go, well, after you're done doing that low-value pre-processing, then I'll take my little straw and I'll build my little connector and I'll pull the data out and put it in a real analytic product over here, SAP HANA or Teradata. No, that's not what's going to happen. Data has gravity. As that data inside that Hadoop cluster grows and grows, compute is going to run to the data, not the other way around. And so the big idea that I'm bringing, I'm not alone in this, but I think it's important to say it, is that over time, we're not only going to do the left half of the pipe, the low-value data acquisition and capture and pre-processing, we are going to do the right half of the pipe. All the beautiful high-value BI and SQL and advanced analytics and machine learning and graph databases and everything that is exciting about big data analytics, everything that's about the analytics, what I often call the right half of the pipe, is going to rush into that empty vacuum that is high-performance, world-class analytic processing in Hadoop. If 2 years ago I would have stood on stage and said we are going to have world-class, production-ready analytic processing in Hadoop, I would have been laughed off the stage. Actually, I did say it. I was laughed off the stage. Very unfair, but I'm right. That's where the data lives, and increasingly, whether you like it or not, that's where the compute is going to live. You have to co-locate your compute and your data, and that means our advanced processing has to run into the Hadoop ecosystem. That's not easy. Hadoop is currently dominated by computational paradigms like MapReduce that are so Stone Age, it's embarrassing that we're using them. I saw a Google presentation the other day where they announced their new data flow engine 10 years after our data flow engine and said, yeah, this is the way you should process data. And somebody asked them about MapReduce, and they go, MapReduce? Sure, we invented MapReduce in 2004 with that famous white paper, but we stopped using it in 2006. Other than a few sort of really bones, simple, distributed data, what are called embarrassingly parallel data problems, it's useless. And so they invented Prego for high-value graph processing. They invented Dremel for high-value, low latency SQL processing. They really pushed the envelope on computational frameworks. And so what you're going to see in Hadoop over the coming years, and the reason why I think people have not appreciated as much what's possible in Hadoop is that you're going to see a wave of advanced analytic engines running natively in Hadoop. And I'm not here to be a vendor per se, but as an example, we announced a couple of months ago our Hadoop SQL edition, where we're doing world-class SQL, low latency, advanced columnar analytic database technology running natively in Hadoop. Fully functioning SQL, full role-based access, full security, full backup, full recovery, full complement of SQL functionality, advanced analytic functions, and the fastest in the world, just to boot. So that's pretty cool. You may not believe this, but in the entire Hadoop ecosystem, as much as Mike loves it and beats the drum, you can't run SQL. Unless you can afford to hire 20 MapReduce programmers who will quit next month anyway, as they get more money to run to the other job. And so yeah, it's kind of a sad state of affairs on the right-hand side of the pipe. But I'm right, it's coming. The data's coming, it's landing in Hadoop. That advanced analytic processing is going to come and live Yarn certified, natively executing as a first-class citizen in your Hadoop ecosystem. And we're one of the pioneers in doing that. In fact, in my next presentation, after we nibble and eat, I'm going to talk about another announcement we're making. But yeah, that's an example of what we're doing, at least, is saying, yeah, that's where data lives, that's where the compute has to live. You better do your parallel machine learning there. You better do your advanced SQL there. You better do every analytic technique you have in that ecosystem. So I'd like this to be a little bit interactive. And we do have another session later where I'm going to focus a little bit on an exciting announcement, but just that whole idea of a new ecosystem, it's all about events. We have event producers. The operational world will produce, my shoe will be producing events. Everything will be producing, and we will have event consumers, these analytic pipelines that we build. So that's my vision of the future. Infinite events streaming at us, capture them, cleanse them, and analyze them by building these pipelines, these analytic pipelines to process them. So I'm curious, you guys talk all the time to customers. Is that crazy? Does it make sense? Is it foreign language? Where are we in this?
If you have generally if you have a theory in scientific research, you have a theory, you look for evidence to support the theory.
Yes,
and I
I
just
do.
wonder if you have any evidence from the world out there in support of your theory that will do what you want to take on.
So I sat this morning with a journalist who is well known and has a deep background in science and was ready to pounce on this idea, I think, that it is analytic pipelines and it is about data science and advanced analytics. And the net result was complete agreement. And I guess one of the reasons I feel confident in saying this is I get to see the most advanced thinking in every business in the world that I visit. And I have yet to find someone who says, no, I'm going to stick with Teradata. I enjoy writing that massive check and having 24-hour latency every time I try to load data. No, I don't see. I think probably the biggest quibble is how fast we can get there. And I think I'm optimistic about the pace of change and the ability of people to embrace change. But much wiser people than me often say that and not just for technical reasons, for political culture reasons, for so many reasons, it's going to take much longer to see these kinds of really large changes. So that's probably the main evidence I see against what I'm saying is you're too far in the future. It's just it's going to take much longer to get there, and that's a legitimate view that I see proven many times when I see how long it takes to get things done. But no, on the core principles, I see nothing but support for that thesis.
But I mean, there's still going to be, no matter how much the world is going to start generating unstructured data and trying to extract meaning and value from that unstructured data, there's still be a huge amount of industry and resources devoted to processing traditional structured data, bank account transactions, credit card transactions, all the stuff that we do today, and probably just as much or more.
How does that all fit in?
Yeah, how does that fit in?
So it's a good question, and we get it all the time. I think structured data doesn't cease to exist. It simply becomes one of the streams or taps. I call them taps, It just becomes another set of taps that I pull in. But it must converge with these other taps.
So do you think the systems that today process that structured data will cease to exist as separate systems, and they'll just be that data will be processed along with all the unstructured data?
I think they will be sources for this system. In fact, most of my customers who think about this, their transactional and structured data systems are loved because they're master, they're good systems of record, they're cleaned already, and they would love to fuse them into the flow with the unstructured semantic meaning and the Facebook posts and the machine generated. I'll give you a good example. We have a customer, worldwide top 10 mobile company in the world, that does a churn analysis. They have 50 million customers. They lose 2% of their customers a year. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. They would like to know who is going to churn. That's a predictive problem. Well, how do you typically do churn? You read your transactional data, you study their CRM record, you extract whatever meaning you can, and you make a prediction about who's going to leave you. What if you could augment that traditional transactional data with device data, what device they're using, and with their social media feeds, what they said about you, and most significantly, the call detail records. The beating heart of that network is recording billions of events about every single call that ever happened, including its call quality. And what if they called the call center at the same time, and that data was in the call center in some kind of voice recognition system? And what if you could fuse all that data and build a picture of that customer that is so much richer and multi-dimensional than the traditional one only from your transactional systems? You would have predictive power that dwarfs your traditional ability to predict. So no, it's not an either or. It's additive. We're just adding the new rich sources of data to the traditional sources of data. That's my view of how it's going to go.
How do you see this playing out in organizations? I chatted with Oracle about it. They're now very consciously retooling their sales force to make 30 to 40% of sales without ever encountering a CIO. Now, that's important because a lot of business people that they're going have a need for certain outcomes, and if the CIO can't deliver them in an appropriate fashion, then it sucks for the CIO.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the CIO has got the carriage of the transactional infrastructure. And in your view, it becomes necessary to stand up this massive and massively parallel second rig. So I'm just wondering, what happens to the transactional systems? Do they come into the cluster as well, or does the cluster sit somewhere else?
No, I think they live and coexist as a source of data, just to be additive to the new sources that are coming. And
so you build an API of transactional apps so that you
can pull them in.
What about the operational side?
So I think the operational side continues to evolve and improve. I'm talking about the analytic workload of how to understand all the events that occurred in that credit card system.
I understood, but I mean, an organization's only got so much to spend on hardware and
Let's go back to, so I get, the real question is, how do we get there from here? CIOs are strapped, losing some respect because it takes 3 times longer than it's supposed to for every single project. I think 2 things are going to happen. One, line of businesses are going to emerge as ever more powerful. They're the leading buyer. You look at marketing analytics, it's almost always the marketing agency that buys it. I visited one of the top 5 in the world data companies that does database marketing the other day. And the person I met with, his title was the CMTO. He was the Chief Marketing Technical Officer. And basically the line of business is not waiting, cannot wait. But they also cannot be bereft of technical talent. And so I think you're going to see an emerging technical talent pool and awareness within lines of business. And that's where a lot of the drive is going to come from. Clearly, in that business, they didn't invite the IT department into my conversation. They were ready to make it all themselves with their augmented technical facilities. So I think that's one answer. You're going to see line of business beef itself up. And the second answer is the cloud. The only way a lot of these people can ever get there would be to have an infrastructure source that used to be your IT department that just, you just dial the knob up. Sure, you pay more money, but just dial the knob up and it responds. And so cloud is going to be the big, game changer, I think, in terms of getting back to a point where your infrastructure resource elastically responds to your line of business appetites.
There are bottlenecks that make cloud really
Very.
take Amazon and Microsoft both run physical sending or SAN services.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big.
IBM's got an upload rate.
It's one of the biggest challenges. I think most of the advanced thinkers in this space, I think that's a false sort of cloud versus on-prem. They're going to see a hybrid, a continuum of where the data is processed. I often say data will be processed where it is born. If it's born in that jet and it lands at an airport, and there'll be little data centers that feed medium data centers that feed the big data center. If you can get your initial load done in the cloud, incremental loads in the cloud are starting to get realistic in a way they weren't before. So it's just a big blurred line.
Hardware is certainly getting a reflection on screen. You look at the servers that are being pumped out as these SAN cards. There's a lot of computing that is disk space.
Yeah, and big pipes, as much as you can see. Yeah, this is you look at a commodity machine. It is a supercomputer in every interesting way. You throw in some flash disk, and a couple of 10G Ethernets, and you could process a boatload of data. If you could, lash 10 of those together. I visited a big financial institution the other day. They had just done their first Hadoop cluster. In 6 months, they'd gone from 50 nodes to 400 nodes because they loved it. I visited them again the other day. They have 1,000 nodes. Where's it going to end? So they're pretty happy with the commoditization. The unhappiness they have, if there is any, is the inability of the software industry to make those strides that you talked about in hardware.
Well, yeah, how many fully multi-thread apps have been?
You're speaking my language. This is the great, dirty little secret of software. It's horrible,
So you guys are talking about the old paradigm.
I'm going to sit down and enjoy it.
So if you come at legacy apps with the new approach to data analytics, it will never work. Because there's a really great paper around this topic. So the new Boeing aircraft, you talked about the jets. Jets are great. There's only so many of those because they're about $35 billion each. Yet China just ordered 70 A330s Airbus the other day in one order. And so there are a lot more domestic aircraft. There are 18,700 flights per day in the domestic air traffic in the US alone. 18,700 flights. All the new software updates in the Boeings that are rolling out now are creating a real headache because every flight